Hey everyone, welcome to Beginnings, the show that asks, where do creative people come from? My name is Andy. I'm the host of the show and a writer and performer based in Los Angeles, California. I will keep this intro short. It is Yom Kippur today. I am mid-fast right now as I record this. I don't know if you know this, but when you fast, you don't get to drink anything at all. So I can't talk too much. I also get too much dry mouth. Why am I not in temple, you're asking? Because temple's boring. I find Yom Kippur and fasting to be very meaningful. Spending all day in temple, not very meaningful. Hey, by the way, this is a great episode today. I talked to Leticia Tamko, a.k.a. Vagabon. Now, if you don't know who Leticia is, let me read you her bio right now. Originally from Yaoundé, Cameroon, Leticia and her family immigrated to the U.S. when she was 13. While she graduated from CUNY with a degree in engineering, a chance event led her to playing music full-time. Her first album, Infinite Worlds, was released in 2017 to general acclaim, and her latest album, the self-titled Vagabon, will be released on October 18th on None Such Records. I've already gotten a chance to listen to it. I can say it's great already. And you know what else I can say? Leticia herself is a great person. I thoroughly enjoyed talking to her, and I hope you will enjoy listening to this. We talk about life in Cameroon, talk about moving here to the U.S., living in Harlem, and some other stuff. Won't spoil it. But check out her music if you've never heard her before, and actually, don't just check out the music, buy the music. I have allotted myself an album a week on Bandcamp. I suggest if you have the disposable income, you do the same. All right, my throat is starting to get scratchy, so let me finish up this intro with a plum. If this is your first time listening to Beginnings, thank you for checking out the show. If you would like to hear more episodes, all of them are on Spotify. You can download them all at beginnings.libsyn.com. And here's where I usually like to suggest to new listeners other episodes that they might like. If you like Vagabond, if you're here for music or indie rock, you know, I've talked to tons of other musicians. Almost exclusively since moving to Los Angeles have my guests been musicians. A lot more time for touring musicians to do some press here. But I've talked to so many people. Rachel Brown of Field Mouse, they just have a new album that's out. It's great. Nick Thorburn, Sadie Dupuis of Speedy Ortiz, Colin Newman from Wire, Black Belt Eagle Scout, The Blow, St. Lennox, Anna Warwicker of That Dog. They have a new album out that's very good. Who else? Ellen Kepner of Palehound was just on. Tons of other people. Laura Cantrell, I love her and her music. Mitski. Check out those episodes. If you like what you hear, you can subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, or Stitcher, and tons of other places probably. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Andy Beckerman. And stay tuned. There's so many good episodes coming up. Magdalene Visaggio, the comic book writer, she was fantastic to talk to. Patrick Stickles from Titus Andronicus was just on. He was fantastic. Josh Siegel, a Emmy-winning, I believe, TV writer who you might know from The Good Place and a ton of other things. So stay tuned. A ton of other great talks coming up. But for now, let's talk to Leticia. And I hope everyone's Day of Atonement is going smoothly. Here we go. I don't know if you ever watch any CBS kinds of sitcoms like King of Queens or any of those kinds of things. And in it, that's always like the husband is like, oh, I gotta ask my wife if I can go bowling tonight. Right. And all his friends are like, you gotta ask your wife, you real be whipped. And then you get into a relationship and you're like, oh, asking your wife if you can go do X, Y, or Z is not, you're not asking for permission. You are being considerate about like, hey, is it cool if I do this? You know, were we did you want something? Did you want us to have dinner?
Yeah, we're a team.
Yeah. And so you're like, oh, that's not like the people who are ragging on Kevin James or whoever they're awful people.
True.
And there's my commentary.
And they're insecure about their relationship.
And there's my commentary. But wait, you were saying, like, I have a lot of questions, but like you were saying, before we started recording that, your knowledge of pop culture is maybe not the same as other people's pop culture knowledge, which is probably both a good thing in the sense that you're not inundated with the same kind of crazy, violent super ego that other Americans have.
Right.
But it's also probably like it's a thing that brings people together in some way.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I feel out of the loop about a lot of stuff. I like to say that as far as music, my music history kind of started in 2014, which is not that long ago. But I don't know, not having grown up here really, I don't really know a lot of the things people are referencing. And it's just too overwhelming at this point to get to know what everyone is. There's so much.
Yeah, it wasn't like when I was a kid and, God, I sound so old, but I'm like, there were 3 channels.
Right.
Everyone watched Roseanne and The Simpsons. And so you knew what everyone was referencing.
But you know that for like growing up in Cameroon, we also had 3 channels, even though it was probably later. It's like Fresh Prince of Bel-Air with French overdubs, Dragon Ball Z with French overdubs, and then World News. That was it. How much?
Okay, so Cameroon was a French colony up through 1960, right? How much of, I mean, I don't know if this is answerable, but I guess what I'm trying to ascertain is just like how much French culture is in Cameroon, is in you in some way.
Yeah, I think it is. You know, that like in terms of like bakeries, like boulangeries on every corner type of thing, like the food, obviously the language, even though there's a whole section of Cameroon that speaks English, that is prominent, but really it's not like, it's really not like as pretentious as French people are.
Okay, so without the like kind of France is like super like France first.
Yeah.
So without the kind of like cultural arrogance.
Yeah.
That is I would say both stereotypical and also pretty real.
Totally.
From what I've experienced.
It's like in a really diluted, simplistic way of explaining it. It's like they colonized us, gave us baguettes and the language and then self-hatred and then left.
Oh, good. Okay. Yeah.
Like, you know, because I mean, you still go to Cameroonians or French speaking Africans go to France and they're like, what? They're very confused by it. And it's like, well, we didn't ask for this.
So you are you lived in Cameroon until you were 13. Mm-hmm. So you were, I'll venture this and tell me how accurate it is again. Mostly formed by there as opposed to, and then you moved to Yonkers. Is that right?
No, moved to Harlem first.
Okay.
Yeah.
Where in Harlem? That's where I lived for a while. That's where Naomi's from.
Ooh, Malcolm X and 145th.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We were Edgecombe and 135th.
Wow. I went to college in Harlem too. So it was like, that's the spot.
City College on the other side of the park.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. So we moved to Harlem first and lived in a 1-bedroom with 4-5 people. And then we moved to the Bronx and then we moved to Yonkers.
Okay.
Yeah.
But so are you mostly formed by Cameroon?
I would say so. I think there was a point where when I first came here, I was trying to like distance myself from it because it was like causing too much turmoil in my young mind. And so like I was like, no, I'm like, you know, went through like an identity crisis basically. But I would say that like once I became old enough to realize like don't be ashamed of where you're from because people don't get it. Like I think culturally and every way that I am, like it's mostly formed by it because my parents, you know, it's like leaving the house would be like, okay, that's America. And then being inside is like, okay, this is Cameroon. Like, even if we are in America, like my household was very much Cameroonian.
And two things. One, I was thinking about this morning. I was like, oh man, so you had this like huge discontinuity in your life of like moving from one culture to another. And I was trying to think like, maybe we could talk a little bit later about like what that, you know, beyond identity crisis. Yeah. What did it actually mean for you?
Right.
But in your household, what did that mean inside your household was Cameroonian culture?
Well, that meant we spoke French. That meant we did everything. You know, we ate dinner at 9:30 p.m. Like, you know, that's another thing the French gave us. We wore like traditional clothes. We only ate traditional clothes. Like I remember not having had tasted a peanut butter and jelly sandwich until like a few years ago. Like I've never had macaroni and cheese, just like a lot of stuff we'd see on television. We just weren't having in our house. We were like cooking traditional food that would take like 8 hours to make. So it was like we had to do all the like keep the same regiment more or less than we would have in Cameroon for like a lot of the first few years that we were here. And then I would go out to school and kids are like doing things completely different. Very confusing.
I mean, New York is more of a melting pot. So was there at least a acceptance, not just acceptance, but just like other people too coming from other cultures? So it wasn't so like if you had moved to, I don't know, Arkansas or something.
No. No. I mean, from Harlem, like to like I came here, I had a buzz cut because so many people have buzz cuts. And so I came buzz cut and people would be like, are you a boy or a girl? And I'd be like, I'm obviously a girl. I'm wearing earrings. And they'd be like, boys wear earrings. And I was just
What year was this? I really thought that like the next generation was way more woke than my generation.
What year is this? I always forget what year this was. But the first time we come here was August of 2001. So like that was scary because September 11 happened and then we like went back. So that was when kids were like, I must have been 9 or 8 and kids were like, are you a boy or a girl? So we went back after September 11th happened and then came back when I was 13 to like live. So it was like, even though in Harlem, for example, like there are a lot of like Africans around, but I went to high school in Dobbs Ferry, New York, which is in Westchester County, which is say no more. Yeah. So that was that.
It is. I talked to someone on the show a couple episodes ago, and they grew up in Connecticut, in an area that's the same kind of thing as Westchester, same kind of thing. And she's queer, and she grew up in the mid 2000s, and I was like, oh, well, that must be a better time. And she's like, no, not where I was. And I'm just like, oh, okay, right. So my brain has gotten accustomed to both New York and just assuming that that my Twitter feed is representative of,
in those places.
Of like that. I'm like, oh, everyone's open now. It's like, no. Just like a handful of places.
Yeah, there's still places that are like, we're good where we are.
In 1872, we're good, stuck here.
We're good.
So maybe we can talk about the discontinuity now. What I keep calling the discontinuity, which is just you moving from one country to another. But I'm just thinking about like what. Okay, maybe we could talk about this. What was your life like in Yaoundé?
Yaoundé.
And which is for listeners who did not look online, the capital of a fairly large city of Cameroon. And what was it like when you moved to Harlem? And how do you think you changed as a person over what I'm calling the discontinuity?
The discontinuity. It sounds very doomy. I like it.
I'm stuck in academic language sometimes when I'm talking about things.
No, that's cool. Yaoundé to Harlem. Oh, very, very different. I think I changed in that I mean, it's hard not to talk about the identity crisis because like I suddenly went from everyone looking like me and being like me and dressing like me, having the same skin color as me, like everything being, you know, me being able to see myself, to suddenly being both like intrigued and confused about the world around me. Because while Harlem is like has a ton of different people in it and a ton of different ethnicities, it was also stimulating in another way, from like how the roads are paved to the street signs to like the supermarkets. Like I remember being so like fascinated by the supermarkets because we had like open like flea market style like markets every weekend, like kind of like farmers markets. And so the supermarkets were these buildings with, you know, and so like it was everything was brand new, but it was like in an exciting way because I was young and like the whole talk is like, you're going to America, like exciting.
And you had a pre-gentrified Pathmark.
Yeah.
Right,
exactly,
on 145th.
Exactly. We used to go to that Pathmark all the time.
How do you organize your life if you have open air markets? Mm-hmm. How do you organize your life? Because I think about like my life is organized because I can go to the supermarket whenever I want, really, but I can just get enough groceries for weeks on end, mm-hmm. and I can organize my life in a certain way where that's how am I trying to explain this? I'll just go through my thinking.
Yes.
I was thinking, I was like drinking some orange juice yesterday, and I was like, oh, if I would go to the market, if I could go to the market every day, I could actually get fresh fruit, and I could maybe like make my own juice. I could eat healthier,
right?
And I could organize my life in a different way and maybe be a different person. Maybe this is a weird way of thinking through an existential crisis. If I could, get fresh fruit and vegetables every day. I'm not saying that that's necessarily what your experience was, but I'm like, how do you, that's for example, like how I was thinking about how I could organize my life differently. How was your life organized with like, in Cameroon? Like how was the actual structures of the way things are built there? How did that structure your life? Does that make sense at all?
Yeah. I mean, I was small. I was young. So like my parents structured my life mostly, but it was a lot of school. Like I basically lived in a compound where like my dad built a house in the back of his parents' house, and his mom was the principal of a school. She had her own school, and the school was on the compound, and that's the school I went to. And she like raised chickens. We had a pet monkey, like one pet monkey. We had a dog. So it was like behind this gate where like that was that's like my world. It's school, it's home, it's my grandparents' house, and it's my pets. And so like I rarely left that compound except to go to the market on the weekends with my family. So it's in Cameroon, there are a lot of like street vendors, like how you could probably imagine it. It's just roads that have no lanes or separation, a lot of like motorbikes, like the like moped type of stuff, which is like how most people get around. And on every few feet, someone's selling something, whether it's plantains, whether it's like fresh fish, whether it's like snacks. There are just like these stands everywhere. So that's kind of what your like everyday supermarket would be. But then there's the big market on the weekend. So I never really took part in like going outside of the compound. My parents were really strict, and so like my cousins were there, my school was there. That's all I needed.
So you were surrounded by so how do you get like acculturated to other people? Is it just like, I don't know. I'm asking, I guess.
I don't think I am. I don't think I am.
So
yeah.
Does that make you a shy person or an anxious person?
Both. Yeah. I don't know if it's a result of that, but I'm sure that it had something to do with it, like being somewhat sheltered Probably because you had to be. It's, you know, like people can say like, can I come and play? But my mom's thing was always like, they can come to you. Like, you don't need to go over there. You're staying over here and your friends could come over. And that translated into like American life too, where it's like, if I wanted to, you know, I like got to an age where I was doing everything that I wanted to do, like despite of how much trouble I was getting in. But if I wanted to go over to a friend's, I was like, why can't your friend come here?
When you say trouble, what kind of trouble are you talking about?
Just like sneaking out and throwing house parties and doing that stuff. I had a fighting phase.
All right, hold on. If you don't mind, I'm curious about this because I never got into mischief when I was a kid. Like little bits of mischief, very tiny. Mm-hmm. I took a bunch of sporks from Taco Bell once.
Wow, that's very small.
So if we can go backwards through these, what was the fighting phase?
Well, the fighting phase was in the Bronx, and I'm not very proud of it, but it is. I've been thinking about it a lot recently because it was the only time I have ever been like that. I'm pretty calm for the most part, but we were such a target in this apartment complex for being African, and we were largely amongst people who looked like us but of different cultures, and it was such a point of contention for them that it's something about us bothered the people in the complex. And so like people would throw eggs at our house, people would like bully, like corner me in a staircase. It was just kind of dangerous and like not cool. And so like people would mess with my younger siblings and stuff like that. So I was already angry and like going through so much transition that I was like, well, I don't understand why they hate us. Like, I don't understand why they, you know, we're cooking traditional food. So like the smells are like, you know, so everyone just found
delicious.
Something. Yeah, delicious. Exactly. But everyone just were just so bothered by our place there. And I remember people would just pick fights with. I've never ever started a fight. People would just like corner me in staircases, and it became like very survival mentality. And it's made me think a lot. It's going to get a little real, but it made me think a lot about the people who are in circumstances that force them into a thing that they're not even. You're just like, well, what do you do when someone is cornering like your younger sibling in a staircase and no one is going to help you because they're all on the same, like you probably fight, or you just like get your ass kicked. And so that was my fighting stage. It was a lot of defending myself for just being there.
Yeah, I would call it a defending yourself phase.
Yeah, defending myself through fighting phase.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean like my slight version of it was like someone picking on my sister.
Yeah.
Jeremy Moser, who I don't mind naming. Can I get sued? I don't know.
No.
Anyway, who picked on my sister, and so I fought him. Who was like, he was like attacking her.
Yeah.
So I fought him.
Yeah.
But it's like the dumb suburban version of that,
right?
Where there's no real stakes besides. I mean, obviously, my sister getting hurt was the stakes, but like,
yeah, it makes you kind of come out of character a little bit. Just like, what this is. And when it doesn't make any sense, and you're just like, I just went into tunnel vision, and it's like protecting myself and my family. And so that was my fighting phase.
It's weird to think that that's in you, though. I don't mean you specifically. I mean one.
That's what I've been thinking about a lot lately. It's like since leaving there, and that's the huge reason why my parents moved us, is like I was getting into a lot of fights, and they were like, we need to take her out of this because how this is going is not what we like came here for. And so knowing that, like leaving there, I've never ever had anything close to a physical altercation with another human being. Yeah. And before that, I never ever did. But that was me there. Like it's shocking.
What is it about the Bronx? My dad, he went to NYU and he lived in the Bronx in the 70s. And he said once, I don't know if this was like a common occurrence or what, but we're Jewish, but we're Reform Jews. And he said like Orthodox Jews would like throw rocks at him because they didn't consider him Jewish.
Wow.
Or Jewish enough.
That's pretty violent.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I have my problems with the evangelical edges of all religions. Right. So, but specifically my own, because that's they don't think I'm Jewish. So
crazy.
Yeah. So okay. So living on a compound, not really going out except to go to the market on the weekends. But like I do think it's interesting. You can just like walk out and get food.
Yeah.
Whenever you want. Again, that's what I'm trying to think of. Like, how does that like the way that society is? I mean, this is so banal, but to say, but like just to like, we don't point to it all the time. But the fact that like the way society, like, one of the big reasons I hate Los Angeles so much is because I love public transportation, and it's very difficult to use public transportation here.
Yeah. And
I don't like my life being structured by Lyft and by having like we have to get a car now. Right. We're just like at the edge of like where it's very difficult to get anywhere.
Right. I hate that.
And so like that's just a very basic version of how a city can structure your own mental health too. Because I think it's worse for us here, our brains. But like, if you can walk out and get food whenever you want, and you're going to the market every weekend, your whole family goes.
Yeah.
Does that like, I'm reaching for something just because like I've been thinking about this lately and I don't have any real answers, but like, how do you think that, formed you as a person? And then like, how does that make you like or dislike all the places you've been since? Because New York to me, like made me like, I can't live anywhere else really and be happy at this point.
Right. I feel that way about New York too. I don't think that I have any idea if it's helped form me in any way, because I was so it wasn't really for social things or for work things as like what is associated with the places I live now, where it's like, okay, when I'm at home in New York, like where's the nearest train? That's factored into where I live. And like, what do I need to go? Where do I need to go? Where's my grocery store? I didn't think about any of those things. So I was really sheltered, and I didn't know if like even though those things were available, they felt more like adult things.
Oh yeah.
You know, like it wasn't like I could leave the gates by myself to go get, a grilled fish on the corner. That wasn't really the case. It was like, it's there. The grown-ups could do it, but you're going to stay here.
Yeah. Sorry. I was also like, as you're talking, I'm like, oh, right. When I was 13 and younger, I ate whatever was in the house.
Exactly. That's kind of what it was.
Or if my parents brought me somewhere.
Yeah. I'm eager to see how it will be for me going back now at this age.
Because I imagine I guess what I'm trying to get at in my head, get out of my head into this conversation is like there seems to be a bigger freedom. That's a terrible way to phrase it, but there seems to be more freedom if you can walk, or if there's food like right there and it's like and around. There seems to be more freedom than having to like. I don't know. I guess I'm like stretching. I'm really reaching for something, but there's something about that feels a little more. I don't know. Naomi and I were just in Amsterdam, and it was such a nicer place than America.
True.
And part of it is just like the kind of like openness. It's open. It feels more open.
Yeah.
America, a lot of places I go here feel closed. Yeah. In comparison.
Right. I mean, New York kind of feels closed, but we love it still. And I think you're right. There are so many places around the world that feel more open than America, and I don't know why that is. I'm not sure, because there's still like a bunch of people in all those places.
I mean, I blame I go back to the beginning, and I'm like, oh, it was. The colonizers were all Puritans, and so who were very closed off as people. And I wonder how much their philosophy on life then structured the
Yeah, I buy that.
I don't know. Again, I'm like, I'm like really reaching for like deep philosophical things that I have given absolutely no thought. So
I like it. I'm following.
But wait, okay. So, house parties. What? Because again, my mischief. Like I was scared of my parents.
Me too.
So I never really. I rebelled in like very small ways that I thought were acceptable. House parties were definitely not one of them. Like, what's this phase of your life where you're just like, fuck this, I'm gonna have a house party?
High school, and I went to an all-girls Catholic high school.
Oof.
Yeah, and so my parents were working a lot. My mom worked for the UN at the time. It was like, or she was working for a nonprofit women's organization at the time. It was traveling a lot. And my dad worked as a doorman, and so he would work into the night. And so I was like, I can, and I wasn't cool in high school or anything. I just was like, oh, I have a free house like this, like everyone can congregate here. And I was so bad at it. Like, you're supposed to like section off different parts of your house when you have a house party. I was just like, here's the whole house, be everywhere. Someone stole a house phone. It was just like it was like crazy, and just like drinking like alcohol out of like plastic bottles. But I'm not really sure why I was doing it, because it's not like I enjoyed drinking, or that. It probably must have been because I didn't have any set group of friends, and I had a free house, and I was just like, fuck it.
Your mom, you guys came here so she could go to grad school, right?
Yeah, to law school.
What were your parents doing in Cameroon? Oh wait, here's a question. Also, so that question too, but also like, did you feel unrooted coming here in some way? I ask this a lot about people who are first generation or immigrated themselves from Europe or Africa, any place that has like a long history. Right. I mean, no human civilization on Earth has a longer history than Africa. And I think about like how unrooted I feel myself. I'm second generation. My grandparents came over from like East Europe. And before that, I mean, as Jewish people, we get kicked out of everywhere for like centuries. And I don't feel like rooted in America really. And I'm wondering, did you feel like, how far back does your family go in Cameroon? Like, did you feel unrooted coming here?
Yes. That's just, I mean, yes. It's, I'm not really sure how to elaborate on that. It's just, there's an ungrounding. Like I've been here, I came here on refugee status. I have been here for 10 years now, more, I think. And I still feel like Cameroon is home. So, yeah.
So what did your parents do for a living in Cameroon?
My mom was a lawyer, and my dad worked in construction.
How did they meet? Because that does seem like working class and like middle class or upper middle class.
Yeah. This is a story that they have never told. I have no idea how my parents met. They're very secretive about it, which makes me think that it was kind of scandalous.
Oh,
I think it was like a whole thing, because my dad didn't go as far in his education as my mom did. And my mom had me when she was 22. So she was like just finishing university. And so I think some, and that in their culture was like a thing. So they've never really told me. I should like pry some more.
By the way, the most common occurrence on this show is me asking a question like that, and a guest being like, "Yeah, I don't know."
Yeah,
I don't know why I continue.
I have no idea.
It's because it's interesting. I mean, there are bits and pieces of it that I think give a better picture of your life. So I think even those little bits are worth asking about. But it is like, I don't know. It's weird to me. Like, I don't want to know stuff about my parents like that. To me, they're my parents. There's like a weird, like I've given them these roles. They're my parents.
Yeah.
And to me, that means that they aren't human in some way.
There are some boundaries there.
Oh yeah, very thick, very like castle wall boundaries.
It would be so fascinating to know how they met, because maybe that'll give me insight on their dynamic or something.
I can see. Okay, here's a good question then from that, which is how. So not knowing this stuff, or I mean, is there the same kind of like boundaries that I've established with my parents between you and your parents?
Totally. Yeah. I mean, I don't even want to call it secretive because no one was like, I'm going to keep this from you. But everyone just kind of like, I want to say everyone minds their own business, but they're not. They're minding everyone else's business too. But there's this understanding that you keep things to yourself if you don't want an opinion about it, basically. So I find that in a lot of American families, like you can tell your parents like, oh, I'm like dating this person, and they're like, oh, we'd love to meet them or something, and it's like, just don't, because they will have an opinion and it will not be what you want, and you're just gonna wish you never had. And so I learned that kind of early on, and so I just like kept things to myself.
Do you think that's also part of like, you said you were a shy person or are a shy person? There's also part of like, do you think maybe that it contributes to shyness, or it comes out of shyness, or here's a third possibility, they just reinforce each other?
I think it reinforces each other because I am very open with, like, I was even at that age, like with a friend or my sister, or, you know, just people who I like didn't, but I had a very low threshold for like hearing someone impose their like opinions and their thoughts on me. And so I kept a lot of stuff to myself, because there is also this, at least within my family, like there was this expectation of like kind of who you should be. And before you even know who you are, you know who you should be. And you just kind of like go with that. You just go with that. But that's more, for me at least, it was like more of the forward facing thing. It was like the surface thing was like, I know who I should be, but like who I am is still here. It's just not, you're just not privy to it. Like there's a boundary there.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, do you think that contributed to your identity crisis?
Yeah.
And B, I 100% identify with that. I have a low threshold too. I don't say this braggingly, but I'm empathetic. And so what I really mean by that is like my antenna's always up, and it's way too easy for me to get attuned to other people. Yep. And especially like my parents' expectations fucked me up for a long time. Not in like, look, I'm not in a bad way. Like fuck me up meant I went to grad school for philosophy. Right.
Right.
So like, obviously, like when I say fucked me up, I don't mean, you know, I was like living on my friend's couch for years because I couldn't live up to, they wanted me to be a lawyer. I just meant that like it was tough to figure out who I was and what I wanted to be, because what they wanted me to be loomed so large in my brain that it took years to decimate that. Yeah. So you dealing with the same thing? Because I think it's interesting then, like you are a professional musician now. And then how did you specifically like break down your parents' expectations so that you could do the thing yet you wanted to do?
Right. I mean, I kind of did both, right? Like I kind of lived up to their expectations, but then like broke them at the same time. So I did go to engineering school. I did double major. I did the whole thing. I got the job before graduating. I did it. But I also left my parents' house without, I don't think I've ever said this. I left my parents' house without saying anything. Like I just left. And I didn't speak to them. We didn't speak to each other for like 12 months. And that is kind of how I was like, well, growing up, I'm always hearing, well, academic is first. And listen, like I'm old enough at this point to like, I'm not upset about their expectations. Like we came here on refugee status. Like I'm old enough to understand that like, if you bring your family here on such a status, you work so hard for them to like get the opportunities, them just kind of popping up out of nowhere and saying, well, I want to be a musician is just like so rude. It's so offensive to all your hard work. And for my parents specifically, they don't have the scope of kind of what you can accomplish in this country. They don't have the scope of anyone having done it before me. There's no one in my family that I know of that did anything in the arts or that wasn't technical. I come from an extremely academically solid family, like all like people who are doctors and have their like MBAs and have their law degrees, like all in one person. So that was always the expectation. The expectation was like, you can't fall too far down from the person who's a lawyer, doctor, and like has a master's in business. You have to be somewhere there. And I get that, because to them that meant more of an assurance that we'll be okay and we won't need them forever. And that's really important to them. They like are like, they're in our culture, we're not very keen on like kids staying past a certain age. Like you go, like you're done, we're done. And so me coming up with this, like, I want to go to music school, I want to be a musician thing, was like, we're not going to like house you until you figure this random thing out. So I did live up to their expectations in that, like, I have a double engineering degree. Like, you know, I did that. But I also went against them in so many ways and against what they had planned for me, because I'm not still at that engineering job, like making however much and like sending it home or like pay, you know what I mean? I'm now a musician making however much, sending it home. and it took a while for them to come around to that being like a legitimate path of a career. And now they do. But I had to kind of blow up my life without really any assurance that it was going to work.
Yep.
You just had to blow it up and be like, well, if my family never talks to me again, at least like I'm living for me. Because I felt a lot of that like anger coming back to me towards the end of college. Like, wow, it's been however many years. I'm literally doing exactly what my parents want me to do. And like respect is taught to us so deeply. Like, you do not go against your parent, especially when they've worked so hard for you. So like, I'm like feeling so guilty and feeling like I'm not being myself.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's like, okay, that's where that forward facing thing comes in again, where it's like, okay, surface me is like getting good grades. I'm like getting a scholarship to engineering school. I'm racking up the grades. And then the real me is like going to punk shows and lying to my parents about it, and like playing in the jazz rooms at school and lying to my parents about it, and then playing guitar when everyone else goes to sleep and lying to my parents about it. So it's like, it's weird to feel guilty about something that you feel like is actually you.
It 100%. I have like a theory about this, in that like the surface self and the who you really are, like the more distance that's between, like the anger comes from the tension between those two things.
Exactly.
Because I know I didn't realize why I was so angry, but I was angry up until I moved to New York to do comedy. And then it kind of just like dissipated. I mean, now I'm angry for that we live in a slowly descending fascist nation.
Cesspool,
yeah. So at least that's external.
Right.
At least that anger comes from external, as opposed to like, I think it was worse when it was coming from inside.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was definitely more like where, I don't want to say violent, because it's not like I was a violent person, but I'd punch a trash can. I don't mean like outside. I mean like I would get frustrated and I would like kick a trash can in my room.
Totally. I've done it's weird. I like how you framed that with like, that's where the anger comes from, because it makes it, for me, it turned me like kind of self-destructive a little bit. Like I got into this, like I wanted to just blow my life up and just like start all over again, because like, how did you let that anger get so thick between the surface you and the real you? And like, what is it for? Because if you're doing things constantly for other people, even if they are your parents who gave you everything, like you're still living for a whole nother person, and their expectations are only going to continue to grow. It's never like, oh, you reached it, great job. Like, we're so happy. It's like, it's never going to be you think like, oh, I'll reach that point, I'll get the degree, and then like they'll be off my back. And no, because now you've set a precedent for you're gonna do exactly what is expected of you. So the next expectation is gonna come, and I had to like break that cycle.
Yeah, and I think it's almost like when I said like, how do you? I mean, we're using like physical metaphors for emotional stuff here, but it's like, how do you decimate the person your parents want to be? And it is that kind of like, you blow your life up.
Yeah.
I got kicked out of grad school. Yeah. Like it's the thing. It's like, I don't know how to get out of this.
Right.
So I will just like, and I didn't do it consciously, but like I definitely, in retrospect, I was like, oh, if I had been a smarter person, I just would have, cause here's the thing. And I did you grow up like middle class? Yeah. If you don't have, if you don't know where your next paycheck is coming from, like I got a stipend from grad school to teach. And I didn't like, that was not free money, but I liked teaching. I got paid to do something I liked to do. And it was like, if I blow this up, I don't have a safety net.
Yeah.
I don't get to like, my parents won't support me.
Well, same. Yeah, that's exactly. And that relates to music so much, because I guess I'm not really for me, middle class maybe means a different thing than other people because of being from Cameroon. Like being in America made me middle class, even if we were living in a 1-bedroom with 5, it was like, we're middle class. Like,
well, I mean, New York middle class is,
like still, but my parents were working so hard. We hardly got to see them. They raised me, certainly, but I was like, I played mom to my siblings. Like I like drove everyone. I did the lunches thing, like all the things, because they had to work tirelessly. And for what? It was like to put us through education. Like education is so important to them. So like in blowing up my life, it was like, not only do I not have any backup plan, any fallback.
Yeah.
I'm now like blowing up the only thing that would give me even an emotional, like, we got your back, or like, you're gonna be okay, or they're there, like I'm literally just like alone. And it's in working since I was like 16 years old. I knew that taking this like path of like doing this music thing and really believing that it's going to be something was like, there's no option of this not working. Like that's not an option. There is no option. And I think that mentally has made it be what it is.
There's also like, there's something liberating, I think, about this idea that like, do your parents know who you are at this point? Because I was thinking, you were saying like, oh, well, they can't emotionally have my back. And I was thinking back to like when I was still trying to be who they wanted me to be, and I'm like, they didn't really have. I mean, they did in the sense that like they loved me and there was unconditional love, and I'm not trying to poo-poo that or say that like that didn't matter. It really did matter, definitely. But they didn't know me. I don't know if they know me now, really still, but like when I in blowing up your life like that. I don't know. There has to be some kind of liberating thing where it's like, oh, well, their emotional approval, I'm moving to a kind of existence where it doesn't matter as much. And so there's something liberating about that moment.
Yes, so much so. And I think that is such a strong thing to have in like these industries. Like it's so good. Like I'm such a, my therapist calls me like a social anthropologist. Like I'm so fascinated by like everybody's like, and I guess you are too, you have this podcast, but I'm so interested about everybody's like existence, like so much. I'm so curious. And I find that a lot of my friends who did have, not that supporting your kids are bad, but just like, their parents like knew them and like gave them, there is this sense of also wanting the approval that they got from their parents out in the world. Yeah. And I just don't have that. Like, I don't give a fuck.
It's really difficult. And I don't, again, I mean, difficult in quotes. Yeah. Because like, I found that like, there's this Mark Maron quote where he's like, showbiz is not your parents. And I have found it's not necessarily my parents, but more about like being like, when I was a kid, I was in the Skinner box of intellectual approval. So living in a world where I got gold stars for being smart, and then moving to a world where no one gives a shit if you're smart or not.
Right.
Where I mean, if we're being real about it, it's like how much money can you make someone,
Right.
and that's really what the measure is. Yeah. And being emotionally set up for the gold stars and not for the sacks with the dollar signs on them, I guess is the metaphor is, if I'm trying to do something like that. I think it's difficult. I think that part is difficult. But the part that resonates with me from you is the part where, like, when it comes to an audience, I don't give a fuck necessarily. Yeah. If I'm making something that I think is honest to whatever I think is honest about me, then I don't necessarily care if they like it or not. And I think there's something freeing about that.
Oh yeah, that's my whole shit. And I think that's like that's what my whole thing is, like, honesty. Even in like how honest I am in talking about like my intention, it's like if I'm making something I can stand by, which is when I have a record coming out in like 2 months, and I sat down and I thought, okay, now this shit like blew up like in a way that you did not know anything about. Now how do you like reconcile that with staying honest? Like, and I sat down, and one of my big intentions were like, okay, impress yourself and be honest, like make something that you're gonna stand by, because all that other stuff, it's like kind of like, speaking of the gold stars, it's like, okay, you like make a record, it gets best new music, you tour around the world 5 times, and you like do all of this really exciting stuff, like selling out stuff here and there. And then if that's kind of what I'm doing it for, that's really, really tricky, you know. Or if I'm doing it to boost my ego, or if I'm just like doing it because like this is a phase and I'm young, like I'm gonna be fucked. So like it's really freeing to not have an attachment to like to not conflate what people think and my like worth, because that's like I've been flexing that muscle my whole entire life. So through my parents not knowing that they were actually giving me this thing where I didn't care, and if I felt good, then I won, you know. It's
really difficult. The and here's a difficult outside of quotes. I've found personally that like whatever kind of like show busy accomplishment or goals that I've had, once I get them, it doesn't do anything inside. There's like maybe a moment of like, oh, this is cool or something like that, but it's empty. Yeah, it leaves you empty. And there might be other people in the world that it fills up, but I found that it's that it doesn't do anything. But like making something that I am proud of, or that I feel is saying something, or is just dumb and funny in some way, whatever. Yeah. That's the stuff that I found actually fills me up.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting because I would agree with you and disagree in my case, because I agree that on a like case by case, like with each like accolade that comes, it's not like I'm like, oh, I'm filled up again. But I think it as a whole, just coming from like an engineering world and like it being so kind of surprising and like all new, and it made me really confident in like the compass I have.
Yes. Okay, that's true.
That's a huge thing that I can keep drawing from like every time. But the individual like nods of approval don't do much. But the whole that initial first time that you're like, oh, you can just like trust yourself and this stuff works.
Like, yeah, you're right. You're right. I remember after I got my first professional job, I was a funnier person, not because not because like it made me funnier, but because I was more confident. I was like, oh, okay, so I can do this this for real.
Yeah. And then you just really like, I'm just going off the deep end with it now, you know?
Yeah. All right. Okay. You're right. The year you didn't talk to your parents, like you literally just left, and then what happened? Do you mind if I ask?
I got into a car accident, my first and my last car accident, where my car flipped over to its side on the 87 as I was driving to school. And I had a moment, like I had a moment of, holy shit, what am I doing? Like, what am I doing? I'm going to school every day. And like, don't get me wrong, I love math, I love physics, all that stuff is great. But I had been waiting. I've been hearing my parents say, you can do music, but first finish this, right? So I'm like doing it to finish it, to like get to my real life. And in that moment, I had this thought that I was like, I can't keep like wasting all this time hoping that I'll eventually get to the real life. Like, it's like peeling all these layers so that I can, why can't I just do it now? And so through the guilt and through that, I was like I moved out of my parents' house the day of my accident. I packed a backpack. I didn't move anything. I didn't intend to move. I didn't have a place to live. For months after that, I just left. And I left a note saying like, I'm okay. Like, don't worry. But like, I had to go, and I would love to talk to you whenever. I left a very nice note, but I couldn't risk telling them in person. And it's very cowardly, but without saying too much, it was like almost a safety issue where I couldn't risk that. So I just left, told my siblings, and I left. So the car accident was a huge, like, I need to like live my own life for me in a way that I'm okay with, so that if this whole shit goes down, I'm like, all right, at least I wasn't waiting for some arbitrary time to just press play on what I really want to do. That's like ridiculous.
It was I mean, the banal phrase, a wake up call. In that sense.
Yeah, it was. And I don't think I even put it together like that. But that day, I remember my mom called. I love you, Mom. My mom called me and was like, she knew what happened with the accident. I had gotten back home safely. Nothing happened to me, which was amazing. Just the car. So like, I'm already like, I'm in shock. And my mom just like was like going on about something else that she wanted me to do. And I was like, oh my God, the expectations are actually never going to stop. Like, it hit me like, no matter how much you do to like do right by it, it just won't stop. So you are literally the only person that can make it stop. And so I made it stop by leaving. And I'm not proud of how I left, but it was really assuring to have my mom, years later say, I understand why you did, and it was like worth it. It's like, I wouldn't do it that way again. I wouldn't tell my siblings to do it that way, but I was no good to anyone in that state. Yeah,
you were car crash clarity.
Yeah,
if I can find some better way of putting it together.
Totally.
There's certain things that like clear your brain.
Yeah.
And sorry, I'm like thinking about. I'm like trying to go through catalog. All I can think of is like crude things, but like a car crash is like one of those things. Like, or in any kind of near death experience that like clears your brain. You're like, oh, okay. All the stuff that's like rattling around in there, that's like mucking up what I really want.
Right.
I wonder if like that's just like that's therapy, is like trying to reduce that stuff. It's like it's like a long version of a car crash.
Totally. I mean, therapy was that for me.
So when you said you had like you like math and physics, do you have a mathematical mind?
Yes.
Or it comes naturally. It's not like
It's not natural. It's totally learned.
Oh, okay.
I actually did quite poorly in math in high school, but I'm gonna blame my teachers, not me. But when I went to college and I was in engineering school, I'm interested in being good at whatever I'm doing. That's just like if I'm saying I'm going to do this thing, I need to be good at it, and I need to learn how to be good at it. So I get to college and I'm in an engineering program, a bunch of international students who have like so many like years above me in terms of like what they've been taught their whole lives. And the American like school system really sucks for STEM programs unless you're going to a super dedicated school for those things. So I was like, oh, I have to like step up or I'm going to be amongst the worst, like in this. And that's just not a thing that I'm interested in. So I very much taught myself, and math is a teachable thing. Like, I think unless I'm secretly naturally good at it, I definitely taught it. And I taught myself. I would watch YouTube videos. I like dedicated myself to it. And then I learned to love it.
Huh. I think it is. I don't think I have a natural brain for math.
Yeah.
I just have like, sounds so arrogant. I'm smart. Like, look, I am smart. Okay.
Yeah.
I guess I can own it.
I'm smart too. I love saying it.
Yeah. It feels so, I grew up and I am kind of an arrogant person. And so at some point in my 20s, I was like, well, I don't like to be this.
Yeah.
So I just kind of repressed it instead of like I should probably just deal with it.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the next phase of therapy. But yes, okay, I am. So I don't know if I had a natural, because I don't like doing math. I was going to be a physicist originally because I like the theory of physics.
Right.
I liked astrophysics. I like the idea of cosmology and doing that kind of stuff, but I really didn't like the nitty gritty. Like if I have to like figure out, I don't know, pulleys and work, I really don't like that stuff.
I mean, I didn't like it either, but I think it goes back to that thing. In my head, I had no choice but to figure it out, right? So I could have said, okay, I failed physics once, and you know, you have to take a bunch of physics. Like I've like failed classes throughout school. Like I failed physics the first time I took it, and I was like, this is the worst class ever. And then I did it again, and then I did like okay. I think I got like a B. And again, all my friends at school are like A's, right? So like me being at a B is like I'm like one of the, like you don't go to me to like study with. And so I just didn't want to be one of those. And I really because there were very few things that I was like, I'm this, like I can confidently say that. I was like, I'm smart. Like that's what I have going for me. Like I'm smart. Like I didn't think about like if I was hot or not, or if I was cool, or if I like had friends. I was just like, I'm smart. And like that's what I do. That's my identity. And so being like in a taught that I couldn't start my life until I did this thing, it was almost like it's kind of like being at the dinner table and telling you you have to finish all your vegetables before you get off the table, like get off the table. And like that's my relationship with school too. It was like, okay, well, by dinner 6, you kind of start to like broccoli, you know, like you start to like peas, like, cause you have to, that's how you get to the playtime or whatever you want to do next. So like I definitely talked myself into liking physics, and now I fully do.
Yeah. So it's almost like if going back to the shitty terminology I used before, like the discontinuity, which led to an identity crisis of who you are, was finally ended by the car crash and by the by this other again, another like a year not talking to your parents, a second discontinuity.
Phase 2.
But really it's that like there's the time in your life that of like where everything was thrown to chaos, and then it's like bookended by these like two kind of chaotic events that then crystallizes who you are as a person, then allows you to actually live the life you want after that.
Totally.
I think that's really interesting.
Yeah. I'm glad I blew it all up, you know?
Me too. Me too. I'm a fan of your music. So
thank you.
Last question. So wait, you came here under refugee status? Was something going on in Cameroon at the time that you guys, that was more than just your mom wanting to go to law school here?
I mean, something is always going on in Cameroon. I mean, from more recently Boko Haram to like Paul Biya. I don't think I can get in trouble for this. Paul Biya, the president of Cameroon, has been president since before my parents were born. And it is, I mean, there is just a high amount of corruption going on, like politically in Cameroon, and a lot of, you know, you can almost, last time I went back at 17, there were these men standing in like military uniforms with guns, and they like confiscated a camera that I had. But my cousin who I was with, who lives in Cameroon, were like, they're not real, like militia, like they're not real military people. Like, do we even have a military? I don't know. But you can like, it's a place where I have experience. You can buy a costume, have a gun, and like do whatever you want. So there is a lot of that. And my parents have been protective over like what exactly happened with them specifically. And like, I probably shouldn't even share their business like that, but just to give you an idea of like the corruption that was happening in Cameroon, and like we had to go. And my mom is very radical in her culture, with her work in like women's rights organizations and like nonprofits and like all this stuff. So we had to get out of there.
So, I mean, how long is that process?
Ooh, my mom came, I think it took like 3-4 years before we were able to join her. So she came to the US first, worked cashier in a Jamaican restaurant in Harlem, and had been just working on that for years until we joined her.
I just asked that I mean, I don't think any shitheads listen to the show, but I want more information out there.
Yeah.
So people aren't just like, people from other countries are just coming over here. And just like, no, it's a very long process.
Very long and expensive.
Yeah. And it, I don't have to turn this into a didactic thing. I just, we live in hell now. So
yeah, I mean, it's definitely not for shits and giggles, and it's certainly not easy to just come to America.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you did. Thank you for coming over. Thank you for coming over and being on the show. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
And we'll see you guys next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, oh, 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 bye.